Good morning. My name is Brian Clark, the president and founder of Ascent, and I am thrilled to be kicking off another Compliance Over Coffee, which elevates voices from around the compliance and regulatory industry for those who work across three lines of defense and in the technology space. Today, I'm really excited to be sitting down with one of our partners, Heather Gentile, the head of Reg Tech offerings, IBM Data and AI at IBM. So a lot under your purview. We'll be talking about a lot of topics today, from the role of technology and regulatory compliance to data privacy, new administration, and how people are accelerating in digitalization. So welcome, Heather. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's great to see you.
Likewise. And I have to say, really looking forward. I know we have a summit coming up in a few weeks, and so hopefully this is a precursor to our work that we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we start, I got to ask, and what's in the mug today? It is Compliance Over Coffee. So
Compliance Over Coffee.
What do you have in there?
Thank you for the beautiful mug. I'm drinking my favorite, Nespresso. It is espresso that keeps me going these days. So great to be sharing some with you.
Yeah, likewise. I got some lemon ginger tea, so I'll get my caffeine kick in the afternoon. Yeah, excellent. So tell us all a bit more about your background and your role at IBM. Obviously, very impressive set of offerings that you have and that you run, and looking forward to learning more.
Thank you. Well, my focus at IBM is on our Reg Tech portfolio, which is comprised of two main pieces. One is our GRC business, which includes our OpenPages platform, which was really the start of our relationship with Ascent, where we are bringing in your data feed in order to infuse the platform with domain expertise. And then the other piece is around financial crimes. So different financial crimes monitoring tools, fraud analytics, basically make up RegTech at IBM. We're part of the data and AI portfolio. And so that gives my offering team the advantage of being able to collaborate with machine learning and AI experts in order to infuse Watson capabilities in support of different analytics like GRC use cases or opportunities to detect fraud and AML. So it's pretty innovative, and we really get to look at the problems that the industry is facing and iterate on how technology can make things easier for our clients.
Well, it's certainly exciting space to be in. I think to your point on the GRC space, right, the containers that we're starting to fill with all this intelligent content to work with your clients. And I know we've had a number of discussions how Watson's connecting their internal data, and there's a lot of opportunity here. And certainly one of the reasons, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're going to be sharing the stage, I think, at the IBM Reg Tech Summit. Do you want to share a little bit more before we kind of dive into some substantive topics about that event and kind of what that's going to be about?
Absolutely. So I'm excited to have you participate this year. We've got a great lineup. We're kicking things off on April 14th, but then of course it'll be available as recording afterwards. So our keynote and our headliner really sets the stage with how organizations are transforming with this accelerated pace of digital strategy. And what that means from an operational risk perspective. Going digital, we see organizations collecting more information about their clients than ever. So implications of that on the good side is you have a lot of data available for AI analysis. But part of the challenge to that is you need to have a data governance framework that allows for the secure collection and organization of that data so that it can be securely leveraged. And from there, we'll go into more of a deeper dive on different opportunities to infuse AI in support of compliance optimizations. And I know this is an area where your team has a lot of expertise. And then looking at some of the relationships of integrated risks, particularly with third parties and from an audit perspective. So it should be a pretty well-rounded agenda.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think, encompassing of what we see in the space. And it is interesting as we evolve, right? You've got those four corners as you were identifying, but we're seeing application across risk, compliance, and audit. And I think we always joke that risk is before it happens, compliance is while it's happening, and audit is after it happens. But the tools of the trade are evolving. and whether you're using AI and machine learning and you're fusing that with your existing software systems, it does create a pretty compelling opportunity for modern digitalization. And obviously, in the environment that we're in, and for the foreseeable future, we'll still be in, probably a permanent shift towards more remote friendly and kind of decentralized work, presents a lot of opportunity for folks in the market. I think that's probably a good dovetail. And we've talked about this concept before of end-to-end compliance, right? How do you get from what we call ourselves on the outside world, you folks on the inside world, and kind of merge those technologies and flows together to solve problems. So what do you consider end-to-end compliance? How does tech play a role in that?
It's a great question, and it's an area that we certainly have a lot of focus in from the GRC perspective. Over the years, we've seen organizations want to get more predictive, more proactive on their compliance strategies. And I think the integration that we've been able to build with Ascent, bringing the obligation data into OpenPages, so that our users are aware of what actions they need to be ready to comply with before regulations go into effect, allows that opportunity to be predictive. Or at least proactive, right? Because you can't always predict where the administration is going to go with their new legislation. But I think the opportunity to start early on, so that the organization has time to put plans into place, leveraging workflows and involving all of the right stakeholders to really take a collaborative approach to compliance. Because the other piece that we're seeing is those lines between first line, second line, third line are really starting to blur now, in terms of working together with a risk-aware mindset, so that if you can anticipate the risks accurately, you're less inclined to have an audit issue to clean up later.
That's a great point. As we go from reactive to proactive, what does that do to the industry? And I had a large bank chief compliance officer at one point say, well, why do we need to do an audit if everything's already set up front? And obviously you still need to go through and verify that, but it is starting to collapse that and say, look, we can be more efficient. We can make sure we're mitigating that risk, as you were saying. So how do you do that, right? You got to build a tech stack for end-to-end compliance. What are the types of solutions and platforms that folks should consider to really solve this problem of, I want to sleep better at night, and I want to know that I'm not going to get fined and have any problems? What do you recommend?
So I think this is a great opportunity to be able to leverage automation, AI, really optimizing the process so that what you have is a repeatable workflow, with the assurances that need to support the decision-making process. And what I mean by that is, taking the example of a new regulatory change, you want to make sure that it's being evaluated from a risk perspective by the first line, so that we understand the business impact. First of all, is it applicable to the organization? And if it is, let's consider the different impacts that we need to be prepared for. But to be able to document that in a repeatable workflow, so that you have that audit trail of the rationale that went into the approach that you took or didn't take. Because one of the greater challenges is on the regulatory interactions side. Let's say there is a control failure or an audit finding, being able to go back and explain, why you felt that action wasn't relevant to the organization. If that's summarized in a chain of emails, that's going to be very difficult to track down. But if you have a system that's systematically creating an audit trail and all of your information is managed in one place, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. That central repository that is staying up to date. Let's dive into this AI concept. And, we talk about this a lot. It's a big buzzword right now. It's almost become more marketing than anything. I think internally, we always joke about AI is anything that 10 years from now we think is normal. If you told me 10 years ago that I could tell my phone to order me a pizza, I'd be like, oh, the future's here. Let's, as we apply to risk and compliance, what types of questions should they ask to make sure that these are effective tools. They aren't just, kind of marketing, but it's actual technology that really solves the problems that they have. What do you recommend?
So, we're seeing definitely an increased adoption around AI tools. AI is becoming less of a black box. And at IBM, we have very much a focus on trust in AI. So with OpenPages, we started, at a very basic level, bringing in Watson natural language classifier capabilities to give our users recommendations on relationships with data. So if Ascent sends us a new action, OpenPages can leverage Watson to recommend controls to help meet that action. For example, from the control library, which could span, tens or 20,000 objects. Moving on from there, we're definitely seeing organizations wanting to adopt AI models in support of, digital business and business strategies. But with that, there needs to be a balance of controls and also understanding how those models are operating, so that if there is drift, you're able to proactively detect that with solutions like OpenScale. So we were able to bring in that OpenScale monitoring AI service in support of our model risk governance piece, which really helps to give organizations confidence in the ongoing performance of those models. You can set everything up with the best of intentions from a governance perspective, but I think a big piece of people being able to accept AI is through effective controls.
This notion of standards, right, in the industry that we see over time as industries evolve, and we're starting certainly to see it in AI. And I think on a meta level, it's interesting to look at how you've got machines doing knowledge work, passing it, at Ascent, passing information into machines that do knowledge work at IBM, and then they're governed by the governance principles. So we are starting to see that kind of elevation of our ability to, allow them to do some of the heavy lifting, and then, sit over the top of these algorithms and make sure they're effectively creating outputs. So certainly more to come here, and obviously the ability to create that end-to-end, as we talked about, is an exciting opportunity. But I want to switch gears here and talk. You referenced this a little bit, the tech stack. There's a lot of current compliance challenges, and so maybe we'll do some quick hits on this. What from financial firms should be involved in implementing a tech stack, right? What should they have to do to solve the challenges with this new technology? What should they be thinking about? And you started with the model risk governance requirements, but interested in your take here.
Yeah, so I think the important thing is that the solution is scalable to the growing needs of the organization. We're certainly seeing financial services firms really across industries looking less at maintaining on-prem solutions and more towards cloud or hybrid cloud. And that's where we're really able to leverage things like containerization, the Cloud Pak for Data platform that OpenPages has become a part of, that gives our clients the advantage of being able to leverage other applications within the tech stack. So just taking data privacy, for example, now that OpenPages is part of Cloud Pak for Data, we're building an integration with Watson Knowledge Catalog to help with that data governance piece. So going back to our model risk governance example, we're able to securely pass model information directly from Watson Knowledge Catalog into OpenPages in a secure way. So, I think you need to have a technology plan that's aligned with your risk and compliance objectives. And we're seeing more and more that IT is not just a stakeholder in the risk and compliance buying decisions, but becoming more of a decision maker at the table and a collaborator. And I do think, it's partially driven by digital acceleration, and, collecting more client data, really having more of an information security view, driving risk and compliance priorities and decisions.
And this is an important concept as we digitalize, right? How do you then use these tools in implementing more beneficial outcomes? Because ultimately, we're all here at the end of the day to help our clients and help the market in general solve this problem, which is you want to make sure you're following the rules. And if you don't, we probably can't help you, right? You probably shouldn't talk to Heather and I if you don't want to follow the rules. But we talked about when we were chatting before here a couple of specific use cases around that. And I know there's new administration, which we'll dive into in a minute. But you talked a little bit about data privacy. Example of what we're talking about here today. How can firms help folks in the market adopt technology that mitigates data privacy risk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think data privacy is a great example because we certainly understand all the pain that the EU went through getting ready for GDPR and then continuing to optimize their compliance there. In the US, we saw the California Consumer Privacy Act go into effect last year, and then many states starting to follow that framework, but with their own nuances. And now, of course, with the new administration, I think we have our best chance ever to get more of a nationwide Data Privacy Act, which on the one hand could make it a little less complicated because hopefully you wouldn't have all of the state legislation that started to pop up. But on the other hand, is not going to be, a small amount of work. And so I think when you look at the way Ascent and IBM work together with a regulatory library and a repository of controls, policies and procedures, and the ability to leverage, upcoming actions that need to be complied with from a stream like Ascent, coupled with AI capabilities to make recommendations of, here's a requirement you met for the UK last year. Watson can suggest, a similar policy, a similar control, and really make that a more manageable process for the user so that users are able to focus on the analysis piece and not the data mapping or, the different administrative functions, really resulting in higher productivity.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. Is when you look at two systems, right, that you're trying to traditionally it's all manual processes, and now you have automated systems that you've got a bunch of data on one side and a bunch of data on another, and they're eliminating 98% of the work on each side. So instead of having a manual many-to-many, I think just to use the tech speak, I think many people have understand the hours required for something like that. You've got an automated system that connects all those many things. And it certainly presents an opportunity. I think you make a great point on data privacy, is this concept of federalization in law, right? Do you have it across a bunch of states and a bunch of jurisdictions, or do you have one central authority? And in this world, there's just fragmentation everywhere. Maybe you go into a new jurisdiction, add a new product. Maybe, the state of California adds a new privacy requirement. But you have to be able to manage that and then ultimately map it to your internal world in something like OpenPages. And so without that flexibility and that automation, the best of intentions go by the wayside. And so it's certainly exciting to see that start to come to fruition and solve those problems in the space. I want to hit on one final thing before we go. The new administration, you mentioned that. What does that mean to regulated parties? What do you expect? Just give us your crystal ball for the next couple of years.
Well, certainly with the last administration, there was a big focus on deregulation, which of course still results in regulatory change. So I'm not sure how much work that really reduced for anyone, but we're coming out of a very unusual time with the pandemic, with the acceleration of digital business strategies, even new, regulatory focus because of COVID and what assurance needs to be put in place. So we anticipate that there will be, a swing in the pendulum, and we'll be coming from deregulation into a period of higher regulation. And I think that's a view consistent that we're seeing across our client base. So now is the time for organizations to really take the opportunity to optimize that end-to-end compliance process, right? Take a look at, where are you spending the majority of your time that could potentially be automated, or where are you finding problems with audit or control failures where you might want to optimize now so that when the pace of regulatory change picks up, your only option doesn't have to be throw more people at it, right? If we can work on some of these optimization projects now, I think people will be in a better position to respond to what comes next.
Yeah, and I think you said it. Right, we help manage delta. And whether that delta is from new stuff or the removal, deregulation, increased regulation, businesses are in the position of having to manage risk, and risk comes with delta. And so it certainly presents a very interesting opportunity to be more efficient, and especially for folks, again, trying to do the right thing. And I think that's an excellent point. Great. Well, with that, Heather, thank you for joining us. Really looking forward again to speaking to you in a couple of weeks on your side of the Zoom at the event that we're going to be working on together. So looking forward to that. Thank you again for your time, and we will talk soon. Thanks everyone for joining us.